hide further flaws and selectively rewards development of convenient half-truths. Just look at the strange juxtapositions of morality around.
You know, they say that life imitates art, but in works of fiction, happy endings are actually possible. Even when things appear to be getting better, you know, on the short term, somehow our culture in the West, it always finds a way to resume the decline. And when things start to get a little bit out of control, in terms of counterculture, you know, when Elon Musk decensors Twitter or Trump wins the presidency back in 2016, you know, Gamergate was another one. There's many examples of these cultural inflection points that should act as a catalyst for societal change for the better. The fabled pendulum swing that we were promised. And yet it never happens, you know, it never comes. And to be fair, I guess the jury's still out on Elon, but I have watched X/Twitter resume their regime of censorship in real time, which doesn't surprise me at this point. There was this growing organic demand for free speech on Twitter. Elon attempted to facilitate this, offering amnesty for the first time to controversial political voices online, a rogues gallery scattered to the wind after years of censure. A vanguard that really can act as pushback against the cultural status quo of wokeism, which absolutely needs censorship in order to thrive. You know, wokeism, and when I say wokeism, I mean, you know, whatever, these fundamentally anti-European, leftoid, tranoid neo-Marxists who are embedded now at all levels of society, who are obsessed with persecuting normal people, who bring this hostile, all-encompassing cultural critique into every conversation. Well, all you have to do to defeat these people is just to allow free speech, you know, because they can get BTFO'd 6 ways from Sunday by anybody with at least a modicum of sanity online. It's not difficult to beat these people in debates. The problem is that they have this apparatus on their side. Just look at how a website like Twitch is moderated, you know, and of course, historically, Twitter was the same way. Twitter becomes like less censored than 4chan, you know. There was a period where, in 2023, Twitter was absolutely wild, man, you know. I mean, it really did take me back to the old days of the internet. So, you know, this highly censored, libtard platform suddenly turns into Encyclopedia Dramatica for a while. I mean, the algorithm continues to spaz out to this day. But then Israel gets invaded, you know? And suddenly you have Zionists of all shapes and sizes coming out of the woodwork demanding more censorship, demanding the power to moderate the conversation based on these advocacy groups like the ADL. And it's not just the bigotry of right-wing factions that's a problem, but in fact there's a new anti-Semitism rising on the left that must be addressed ASAP. And of course Elon just takes a trip to Auschwitz, and I guess that's the end of that. Because of course we're all learning now that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and even like a far-left woke critique of Israel is completely unacceptable, you know? Whereas of course a woke critique of American nationalism is just the basic woke bread and butter, you know? It's completely fine. But Israeli nationalism, Jewish nationalism, hold the phone. That is true power, I guess. The power to influence the culture at your whim. But for the average straight white male gamer, you know, the founding stock of a lot of these nations across Europe and of course the US, somehow, some way, nothing ever really gets better, you know. These aberrations are corrected seemingly by the hand of God, at least I guess that's what they'd like us to believe, just completely out of the blue. There'll be like a black swan event. Back in late 2019, you know what? Things are getting a little bit too based in the US, you know? People are liking Trump a little bit too much. So you know what we need? A freak viral outbreak of some mysterious disease. No one knows where it came from. No one even really knows if it's even real. But the mainstream Judeo media will of course treat it as completely real, legitimate, in fact, so much of a threat that society needs to shut down for multiple years, right? So now families are being divided by this psyop involving vaccines. People are pitted against each other. No one can trust each other. A total breakdown in social cohesion. Oh, by the way, in 2020, yeah, it looked like Trump was like the most popular president of all time, but it turns out he's the second most popular. Because the most popular was Biden. More votes than Obama, even. GG. By the way, January 6th, yeah, that's an insurrection. Right? Everyone involved with that is a terrorist. George Floyd riots, totally fine. Don't ask questions, move on. You know, we lose again. The gamer loses again. It's not okay for the gamer to win ever. This is something I've come to accept over the last few years. The game is rigged. The social game that we're all expected to play. It's not necessarily that things couldn't get better. And I'm talking across multiple levels in our society, entertainment, education, politics, everything. It's that in this scam society, we're meant to be unhappy. It's as if we're living under an occupying force. Revenge is being enacted. We're all being punished. That's what wokeism is really all about. Cut through all the word salad, and what you're left with is basically like a secular religion of anti-whiteness, which curiously also happens to be the ideology of the elites and also, the corporate world. These unelected entities that hold so much sway over our society and our culture. There's a fundamental disagreement between me and them, and it boils down to, I want my children and my children's children to have a future. And for a variety of reasons, a lot of which I've discussed on this channel before, they don't. It really is that simple. The people in power are sadists in a way. The type of person who thrives amidst this modern woke culture, who's promoted and signal boosted. Like BBC headlines in the UK, all have this sadistic element. It's like rubbing the decline and the despair of modern life in the faces of the citizenry and saying, you don't like this, where it's going to get a lot worse, and you deserve it, The Bolshevik commissar harassing a farmer, the trans activist threatening to stab cis people, the developers that work at machine games, reveling in the violence and torture of quote-unquote Nazis. It's all the same energy. Not that it's mutually exclusive to leftism. We're seeing a lot of right-wing Zionists exhibit the same kind of sadism on a daily basis at this point, rather revealingly. But it's certainly a personality type. Very authoritarian, controlling, narcissistic, a Luciferian archetype. This is the spirit that dominates almost every aspect of this modern regime we have in the West. Call it what you want. The fact that you, as a young, white, straight British man, you're living in a society that's actively hostile to you and your traditional culture and way of life. Pure anarcho-tyranny, that is life in the UK, where you'd think living under an authoritarian police state would at least guarantee safe streets or something. You could walk home at night and not be stabbed, but in the anarcho-tyrannical European system, criminals are protected by the state, under the values of neo-Marxism, like a state religion, the religion of the system. The police really only exist to enforce and protect this withering social decline. And in the US, at least there's the illusion of having two different ways of life that you vote for. The Democrat and Republican vision of America is still quite bipolar, despite ultimately being just political theater. But here in the UK, both parties are absolute cancer. Both parties are basically communists, virtually identical in policy. They both loathe the white British working class. Both parties are pro-immigration. Both parties are committed to managing this unstoppable spiral into despair, as if the British people couldn't be more humiliated. While the state-controlled journalists rage endlessly about the threat of right-wing extremism, something so ill-defined, the average butcher, the average farmer or human, is robotically marked under this category. You feel the spiritual malaise just hanging in the air. Take a trip to London and just see how far the city's fallen. It's like a complete dystopia. A distant memory of visiting Sega World as a child, at the London Trocadero. Modern London feels like a level in Sonic the Hedgehog's CD. It's the dark future of London. And everyone just wants to go back and say, what the fuck happened? We didn't destroy enough of Robotnik's time robots. And look what happened. We are thrust now and trapped in the dark future of one of the greatest Western cities of all time. That's just the nature of this timeline. The French, they live in the dark future of France. The dark future of Paris is now a reality. Sonic failed. Robotnik acquired all the Chaos Emeralds and then retreated to Israel, I guess. It's over. It's Jover. And yet here we persist. The gamer lingers on, clinging to these hazy, nostalgic childhood memories of a better time. A time that he's questioning whether or not they may have existed at all. Or if they're just another phantasm of life as a gamer in this insane society, just another mirage, just another illusion, another cope. And that's the great thing about gaming, classic gaming. It's that there was always potential for multiple endings, It's that maybe on first playthrough you got the bad ending, but it was motivation to go back, maybe check the wiki, or in my day it was GameFAQs. Maybe immerse yourself a little harder, play a little better. And who knows, maybe right some of those wrongs, fix some of those mistakes, and walk away from the experience with a conclusion that you could live with, Like at the end of the underrated 32X classic Knuckles Chaotix, where the bad ending sees you during the credits looking over this scene of total, utter urban terror and genocide, buildings burning, untold lives snuffed out while Robotnik's evil robot hangs in the distance, like Ozymandias himself looking upon his works in despair. What gamer could live with that, Because of course, the classic Sonic games, there is a good ending and you have to collect all the Chaos Emeralds to qualify, and usually it involves stopping Robotnik once and for all and ushering in a golden age. Not unlike the end of the Spanish Reconquista in 1492, when of course Robotnik was expelled at the behest of the Catholic monarchy. But I guess the canon ending to the games, he does always escape. Because Robotnik has been kicked out of like 109 different zones at this point, and every time he comes back, so Sonic, being, I guess, a libertarian, he's really acting out the flaws of his ideology, because ultimately you need to snuff out evil at its root, that is simply the only way that the things we love can truly be protected into the future. The good future of Mobius is not forged just in rings. Blood too must be spilled, the trees of the Green Hill Zone must be watered with the blood of patriots and tyrants alike, wouldn't you say? But of course, we're just talking about Sonic here. In real life, we don't really have a Sonic, we don't have an avatar for change. Especially with the stigma attached to Sonic-like figures, especially after the middle of the 20th century in World War II. A Sonic in Europe in the 21st century? Surely you must jest. These types of strong historical figures, these Caesars who cross the Rubicon and fix a dying system by wielding power unilaterally, and it may not be pretty and it may not really be palatable, but ultimately it's either that or a total societal collapse. We've seen this play out many times throughout Western history. And the question is, in the open society, the Karl Popper, Fukuyama, George Soros, post-20th century society that we live in right now, is it even possible for Sonic to emerge, when so much of Western liberalism is based around preventing, in this post-Nuremberg paradigm, Sonic-like figures from rising up and actually representing the people of Europe, actually having a real sovereignty in their nations where their culture is preserved, where their interests are represented politically, and where the Western neoliberal regime isn't just this constant modulating force around the globe, where Knuckles could rise up in the Middle East and perhaps create like a gold-backed currency separate from the usurious system forced onto them by Robotnik's puppet, the US government. And, how can America be considered a sovereign nation when it serves the interest of Robotnik over the interest of the average American citizen? This is all I'm saying. But really, the closest video game universe that our current society resembles is probably like Dark Souls 1. We know Sonic is obviously like fashy or whatever, but, Dark Souls is also implicitly right-wing. It's like a Spenglerian cycle of civilization continuously occurring. And, Dark Souls 1 takes place at the end of one of these cycles. But as the main character, you're brainwashed into sacrificing yourself to continue what is in essence like a failed system, and it's like the Dark Lord ending is the good ending in my book because it's about just letting things collapse. It's that there is no virtue in sustaining and prolonging this failed system. The gods have become degenerate. They are husks of their former glory. There's nothing left to preserve, It's time for the age of man to begin, the age of dark. Let's let mankind actually forge their own path instead of being managed as this loathed underclass, oppressed by the dark sign and the prophecy of the chosen undead, and shepherded by these illegitimate demigods, their power stolen, their glory faded, their beauty illusory. Dark Sun Gwendolyn is transcoded. Here's me flexing my media literacy for you. Unfortunately, I can't do the Vati Vidya date rapist voice, but you get the gist of it. And just as a quick addendum, I said that Sonic was fashy, but I really mean Japanese Sonic. American Sonic is like a Protestant libertarian philo-Semite.